everybody. I'm Audrey Moore with Audrey Helps Actors, and this is episode number 64. Looking to score this 2021. I am so excited to be hearing about all of your wins. Whatever your last year looked like, whatever this year is looking like, just what I love so much is anything can change at any moment. That's one of the best parts about this business, and definitely one of the best parts about this career path. And I love getting messages and emails from you guys about how you were stuck in a rut. Maybe you had a level and you couldn't level up to the next place, or maybe you just couldn't really get arrested in any town, and then suddenly you did something, you made a shift, and now you're booking jobs. I just love those emails. You guys know when you send them to me, they really warm my heart, and I'm so happy to be receiving them. This is what this season is about. This season is about getting your shit together and just doing the work to do the work. It's that's what I'm so passionate about for this podcast is there's the acting side, and then there is the business side, and there's a creative process to the business side, just like there is to the acting side. And I just love hearing from you that you've received that and are starting to see results. So yay to all of you. In alignment with that, this is a friend of mine. His name is Michael Toe. Michael is an East Coast actor. He lives and works in Boston and New York City, and he is so great. He is a second act actor. So for those of you who are maybe coming back to acting, or maybe you are just coming to acting after having another profession, this is going to light you up. Also, if you are a person who just really gets off on hard work and stories about hard work like I do, this is really going to inspire you. I mean, listening to him and talking with him all the time, it just really fills me up with so much oh, we're going to do it. I'm going to get so much work done and it's going to be awesome. I'm going to see so many results. So yeah, it's sort of like a good shot of work ethic steroids, I think. So there you go. If that's your pleasure, I got the episode for you. This episode is brought to you by Greg Saffel at singinglessonslosangeles.com. If you have not done voice work as a part of your actor preparation, if you've taken scene study classes and on-camera classes, improv classes, and you have not done your voice work, you need to. singinglessonslosangeles.com. We are also sponsored today by Brad Greenquist. Bradley Greenquist. You guys, Brad is sort of legend in Los Angeles. He's very well known for his on-camera technique and training, especially now that so much is on Zoom. I think that's so valuable. So Brad Greenquist. And he is at bradsclass.com, www.bradsclass.com, bradsclass.com. All right, you guys, I hope you are self-taping an audition.
Audrey helps actors because they don't know anything.
Hi, everybody. I'm Audrey Moore with Audrey Helps Actors, and today we have...
Michael Toe.
Hi, Michael. How are you?
Hey, Audrey. How are you?
I am so happy that we could do this podcast. I think you have so much information, inspiration, and compassion for the actor. And so I think this is going to be such a great episode.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. We sort of go way back in more ways than one.
That's true. We sort of do, don't we? So tell everybody a little bit about where you live, what your markets are, whether or not you are union, how many, maybe pre-COVID, how many auditions you used to get.
Sure. To set the stage, I'm in my early 40s, Asian American, and I'm based out of New York. I grew up in Boston, so I'm actually, I still have a place in Boston and New York. So that's where I'm at. Probably about 2 years ago, I kind of moved to the early guest star level. Mm-hmm. And then kind of right before COVID, I was pretty much guest star level.
Wonderful. And how many auditions a month would you say you were getting-ish?
I think my numbers, this was maybe 2019. I think I was at 40 to 50 for the year. So That's...
1 to 2 a week-ish.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Excellent. And so tell everyone also about because what I love about your story so much, Michael, is that you are a working actor. You also have another job. You are a husband and a father. And what I think is so inspiring about your story, you have such a great attitude and a love for the work. And I think a lot of times people get into sort of a victimness about the restrictions that they're in. So maybe the restrictions of being in a local market, or the restrictions of their financial concerns or needs, the restrictions of maybe being able to have the time, energy, and money to prep for things. And you really are such a fantastic example of somebody who has taken just your power, I feel like, and done the work to make it work. So tell everybody a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I started late in the game. So I probably came back. I started as about 10 years ago. I did all the acting stuff as a kid, stopped it. And then in Boston, they started having more films and with the tax credits. And so I started doing, it was just completely had given away all my acting days and started coming back slowly. And whether it started out as background stuff, it started out as then, a small role in the Showtime show that got me my SAG card. And then, but I didn't have any dreams because I'm in finance. I have a financial planning practice and I work a lot there. Dad to 3 girls, and it's a lot of work. So I love the acting piece and went a little by little. I said, all right, well, I'm just going to try it here and we'll try to get to the next step. And there was no real any grandeur of major stuff, but just kept saying, all right, well, how do I get to this next level? Well, I need to do this. I need to train here. I need to do this. And everything was one step. I never was thinking 2 steps ahead. Or let's say I would never think 5 steps ahead.
Yes.
And then, then Boston was great. But then at some point I was maxing out in Boston and getting what I could get. And there was a lot of those were stereotypical stuff, which I understood and kind of, had my worries about at some point, but you kind of straddled the line and find out what I could do, what I felt okay with doing myself and what I felt. And I turned down things that were, against my morals of doing. Mm-hmm. But then all of a sudden, New York, I said, well, all right, now I can just do the New York. I mean, I'm lucky enough that I'm 4 hours drive. I could be in a place that it could be, 10-hour drive to a major market. Mm-hmm. So I'm 4 hours. So instead of looking at it as like, oh, I'm not in a major market, I looked at it the other way. I'm actually lucky that I'm close enough to a major market. And that's my attitude. And so I'm like, all right, well, I'll make that happen. I'll work things around. If I need to go to an audition, I'll do it. And that's how it started. So I kept going higher. And I said, all right, when I finally hit my ceiling, then at that point, I'll, stop there and be happy with what I have. But it never happened. And so it just kept going. And even to today, it's still going.
I love that. Yeah, you're such a great example too of what I call the second act actor, right? And I love the second act actor so much because of the mature approach to the career when you come at it in your second act. And so I love your clarification on you were thinking 5 steps ahead. One thing that I made a joke about in this series of podcasts for this little mini season is that actors are sort of like step 1, be a great actor. Step 2, step 3, win an Oscar. And there's like nothing in between step 1 and step 3, right? I also noticed that about second act actors, that the pursuit can feel a lot less torturesome because instead of every day feeling a little bit like a loss, which is how a lot of actors in their youth approach it, every day without an audition is a loss. Every day without a booking is a loss. Every day without somebody affirming that you're making the right choice with your life is a loss. I very much identified with that for a long part of my life in this pursuit. And when you're a second act actor, every day that you get an audition is a win. And every other day, it's just another day. And every
other day is a day to work on other things.
Yes.
To make, and that's the part of my business side is that I've built up a financial practice, and it works for all kinds of businesses where the same idea of building up a business is the same idea as we are of building up our careers. You can't, it's not like everything you do all of a sudden has a immediate return. It's not like, all right, I got this, I added this, new headshot, and now I need exact returns where I made this connection. I'm at this cool party, but I didn't get any major thing out of it in the next week. So
Yes.
but it's like a lot of these things are setting the groundwork for years ahead. And that's how businesses are like that. It's advertising in business. It's not like most advertising in business is not just like, here's the special, come on down this day. It's more like building image and that takes years of
Yes.
building. It's the same approach for an actor. And if you go by that approach, what you're going to do is you're going to set as many seeds as you can because you know that these will be blooming at all different times. A lot of actors kind of look at it as, well, I planted it, nothing happened, so I'm not going to plant anymore.
Yes.
And that's it. But,
Yes.
but my feeling is, all right, let's if this doesn't work, but that's fine. There maybe wasn't an audition or some sort of something that comes out of this, but it doesn't matter. I built a connection. I built a relationship. Someone else knows of what I'm doing, and all these things, they do come around. It could be a month, it could be a year, it could be 10 years, but they do. And then all of a sudden, if you keep doing that, now you have this compounding factor where you're doing more and more things. So rather, it's not just more and more things of one day. It's more and more plantings that you've done for the last X amount of years behind you.
Yes, I so saw this with my friends ahead of me who had sort of gotten their series a little bit, a few years ahead of me, right? And that they booked a series, and then suddenly, like, every casting director started calling them in and booking them on other jobs. And I remember finding that so fascinating that like that they booked the series, and then suddenly they booked all these other jobs. I would think like you would book all these other jobs, and then you would book this series, right? And what I thought was so interesting about that was they had planted all these relationships, right, over years of auditioning well, and just things just maybe not quite clicking, right? But then once they had some heat on them, right, that the compounding interest of all of these relationships over time, all of the good auditions, all of the exciting work and hours being put into it now could really come to bear fruit. And all those years that felt like maybe all for naughts and losses suddenly were able to be returned on their investment with really huge gains. And then with every little or big guest star or recurring guest star or other job, that then lifted up them even further in addition to the series. And then they were able to get even bigger and greater parts.
Exactly. And there's so many actors who don't get to that point because they self-implode. They don't realize that they're so close or just about to get their break or just about to get their steps to the break. But then they say, it's not working. I'm going to give up all this momentum that I've had, that they might not see it as momentum, but all this like groundwork that they've been all of a sudden they're like, no, I can't do it, or it doesn't work. I'm going to try something else, or forget about that. I'm going to stop this idea of setting this groundwork down. In business, you can't do that. You always have to continue to set it down, and have the trust in it. And that's maybe, whereas from a business person who's built a successful practice, is that I've seen it work. So I understand that it's not all for naught, where someone maybe who's younger or maybe hasn't, had that same experience, they don't have the faith in it as much.
And another important thing that you're describing, which is a challenging difference between actors who've only acted before and actors who've maybe been successful in another endeavor, is that acting has this unfortunate sort of professional hazard where you're the product. So the identity of the losses versus the gains feels very much personal. Feels like it's you. You are doing something wrong. Whereas if you, invest in something and it doesn't necessarily have its returns, you don't feel like you're bad. That was just an investment that didn't maybe pay off. And I think that actors, I really encourage everyone to be in therapy, particularly when you're starting as an actor, because the need to separate the not getting a job from the personal experience of you are bad and you have done something wrong. And also conversely, that you got the job and so you are good and you have done something right. It's a very big sort of like ego tornado that actors can get into, and it's very tumultuous and hard to withstand, literally, and causes people to, like you said, implode.
Right. There's so many. We know an actor, my friend Ian, who's in our group, who's he fantastic actor, and he went through a tough spell where he wasn't booking. He was getting so close, but it was a pretty long stretch where he wasn't booking though. But at some point you could say, all right, well, I can't do it. There's all the pressure that started coming with the agents, and well, what's happening, the family of where you're going to book. But he stayed at it, continued to build this stuff. And then, you fast forward now a year and it is gangbusters for him because he's been set. All that work wasn't a failure. It was actually just setting himself up for now.
Well, that's also, you're talking about the leveling up process, right? Which I love to talk about. Part of the essential components to deliberate practice is that as you're leveling up into another level of growth, the beginning of that leveling up feels exciting. And then as you go further into it, usually it sucks because there's some growth that actually needs to happen. And because the growth actually needs to happen, it means that you're not as good at something as maybe you need to be. And so there's this gap between your ambition and excitement and then the skill really being fulfilled. And I find it's very common that whatever the level is, what makes leveling up so hard is it's hard to withstand that gap. Like the ego can get in the way and it gets too frustrating. And then you go back to what is comfortable.
On that, it's also self-awareness, right? To be aware of what is the reason at that new level, what is your weaknesses? And a lot of times people don't see it, or they're not willing to see it, or they think already that it used to be a strength all the time, and they can't really accept the fact that it's not really as good as it needs to be. And so I think that self-awareness with actors is really important, which is why it's very hard sometimes to just go at this alone.
Yes.
If I'm gonna do a business and I'm gonna run a successful business, I'm not gonna run a successful business myself. I mean, I might be the CEO, but I'm gonna need my right hand man. I'm gonna need all levels of people who are working with me as a team. Yes. And to me, that approach is so important. And that's how you and I are very similar in a lot of different ways, and that the way we approach things. And coming out from New York, Boston, I didn't have a lot of it wasn't like all my friends were acting, especially in Boston. There was very, very few kind of actors that I could connect with at my level. And and looking at it from a business point of view, I would say if I had the information, I know how to address it. But the thing is, I didn't know I didn't know how to.
You didn't know what you didn't know.
I didn't know what I didn't know, or I knew I knew I didn't know what I didn't know, and so I'm like, I know there's information out there. It's not like there are books on what you talk about. It's not like you can just pick up a book, because a lot of the books on acting or the business of acting are years old.
And it changes so fast, right? Like literally the trend of 2019. The expectations of 2019, the practices of 2019 are literally right now, 2020, out of date. So many of them.
That's right. And when I started, when this is more my beginning growth happened, I was reading books that were, like 10 years old about, dropping off headshot, or even a step before that, I forget what it was. So that to me I always needed it. I knew that I could strategize once I had the information, but if I didn't have it, I felt lost. And then, so my friend who's an actor, James, this was maybe 2 years ago. We were at an audition. We just sat to talk one day, and he's like, "You got to check out this podcast." I had never listened to a podcast before ever. I didn't even understand it. And I tried doing it on my phone. It didn't work. I'm horrible at technology. One of my biggest weaknesses. He's like, "You got to check it out." So I'm like, "All right." And it's Audrey Helps Actors. So I kind of took that piece from him and finally got my understanding how to listen to a podcast. And once I heard it, I was completely hooked, because that's exactly what I need. I needed to understand these pieces. And then I had no problem of doing those things and then kind of taking those tidbits and lessons and things like that to then on my own style. So I reached out to James, reached out to Ian. So we started to get this group together, and it was and we had a bunch of people come in and out who maybe weren't as to the same drive as we were.
Yes.
So we've it's kind of morphed. So what we started doing is saying, all right, let's start this group where we can be really honest with each other, just like you are to your listeners. Because before it was kind of like go it alone. No one wants, you see the people at the audition, you're like, hey, and you give a little bit of tidbit of what's going on, but no one really wants to tell their secrets.
Yes.
No one wants to help anybody. And it's not really the people, it was the system. It's built kind of that way to be like, you can't trust anybody because you're fighting against that person. That's your competition. That's not your friend. And so we wanted to go past that. And so James, Ian, and I, we would do the self-tapes every week. And then instead of being like, oh, great job, oh, great, you did it. We were much more like, well, that's great, but the sound wasn't that good. That, you notice you're blinking a lot here. Every time you go on the lines, you're blinking. We started critiquing each other, and then we started building our group to now it's about 6 of us. It is basically an Audrey Helps Actors, born group. So it's been like everyone has their own parts that's helpful. So it's not like we have a group of everybody doing the same exact
I love that
thing.
But wait, Michael, wait. You're so inspiring, but I have to interrupt you.
Help me. I need some help.
And now it's time for listener questions.
I'm so scared.
This listener question is brought to you by singinglessonslosangeles.com. That's singinglessonslosangeles.com. So we have Greg Saffel. I work with Greg. I know a lot of people who go to Greg, people who have been in acting class, then left that acting class, then got some voice lessons, then came back to that acting class. And the teachers are like, oh my God, what have you done? Your voice is so dramatically improved and you have so much range. What have you been doing? And they're like, I've been going to Greg Saffel at singinglessonslosangeles.com. And they're like, oh my God, I have to send all these people to Greg now. He is such a gem. In addition to being just like the sweetest, kindest person ever in the whole wide world, you will really appreciate his approach. He does things virtually. That's already was set up before this pandemic happened, which is super great. He can work with you on your vocal fry and improving the strength and diction, articulation. If you're a person who does a lot of jargon, if you're like, hi, yes, here's all these technical terms and this technical thing went to this technical thing and we did all these technical things. Diction is such an important part of that, being able to have people clearly understand what you're saying. I just want to just say 1,000 times, body and voice. Don't be doing 5 hours of yoga every week and then neglecting your voice. It is our bodies and our voices which are the instruments with which we express ourselves, called acting. All right, so you can go ahead and check him out at singinglessonslosangeles.com. And again, just a reminder, if you have listener questions, please call us at 667-ACTOR-70. That's 667-ACTOR-70.
Hi, Audrey. This is Tanis Peranto calling from New York. We have Instagram DM'd about your show. My question is about really changing your look for an audition. For example, wearing a wig, changing your hair, maybe like, I don't know, temporarily coloring it or something. Because I hear people do that, and I feel like I've seen maybe you do wear a wig for an audition. So I'm wondering, if you do that and you book it, then what? Does your agent give casting a heads up, say, hey, this isn't actually really your hair? Does it matter? Does it not matter? Yeah, that's my question. Thanks. Bye.
Hi, thanks so much for your listener question. I love talking about wigs. OMG, wig life for life. Fake hair, don't care. Okay, here's the thing about wigs. Yes, I have worn wigs for auditions. Yes, I have booked jobs wearing wigs. Yes, I have worn those wigs to set. So a big thing is that once you start working a lot, you'll actually see that almost, I would say like 80% of series regulars are wearing fake hair. That's just sort of like a thing that is occurring. So there's a couple of rules of thumb. I know people who've booked series regulars wearing wigs. I know people who book commercials, who book co-stars. There's a few things that are important. First of all, I really recommend that it's real hair. Real hair wigs are more expensive than fake hair. And this is because it deserves some styling often. What you don't want to have happen is wear a wig for an audition and then show up to set and then have them want to change or do something to your hair that's a little bit different than what you did in the audition, and they can't put a curling iron or blow dryer to it because it will melt your hair because the hair is plastic. So I highly recommend real hair. All of my wigs are real hair. Another thing about this is that, like I said, when you go to sets, I'd say 80% of the cast is wearing a hairpiece. They're either wearing clip-ins or they're wearing an actual wig. This is men and women are doing this. And it's because our hair is a really big part of the storytelling. That's why we have a hair department, an entire department devoted to the stories that a haircut or style says about a person. I really recommend even things like certain hair sprays that are a little bit colored. Like some women have incredible blonde hair that's like been done in Beverly Hills for like $500, and it looks amazing and it looks expensive. And it's got all these highlights and lowlights, but that's not really the trend for period stuff right now. They sort of want, if you're going to have blonde hair for period things, if it looks like it just got done yesterday at the most bougie salon in Malibu, then it tells a higher end story, and that maybe doesn't go along with the very rural 1950s housewife that you're going to be auditioning with. So you can even get like a root touch-up spray in like a light brown or a dusty blonde, and you just put it in your hair and just sort of calms all the color down, and you can wash it right out. Super manageable. I did my research before doing wigs, and when I asked hair people and makeup people that I knew who were sort of in that trailer if it was a problem, and they said no, that it happens all the time. Some recommendations they use or have: if you're going to wear a wig in the audition, they recommend wearing the wig to set. Like basically don't freak anyone out that that's not your hair. So instead of like showing up to set with your hair as it is and then bringing the separate wig, that can cause people to panic. And you just don't want anyone to panic for any reason. But do get up in the morning, put your wig cap on, put your hair on, and then show up. And this is even for wardrobe. Like, I'm not fucking with it at all. If I book in a wig, I show up to wardrobe in my wig. If I book wearing hair extensions, like really long period hair extensions, I show up to wardrobe in my hair extensions. If you show up to wardrobe and hair and makeup is close by, say you're going to a studio lot and they do wardrobe fitting, you can say, is it possible that I can go ahead and talk to hair and makeup real quick? Is that possible? They will always say yes if it's there, if it's on location. And then I just walk over there and then I show them my hair. And I'm like, hey, so I'm wearing this wig. It's natural hair. And I have like the video of what I did in the audition or how I looked in the audition. I said, this is what I wore in the audition. And I just sort of wanted to like give you a heads up if there's anything you wanted me to do differently. Sometimes they'll have me take the wig off and they will maybe see what I've got to work with. And almost always though, they'll just say, you know what? Yeah, I'm glad you told me. This looks good. If this is what you wore to the audition, I don't see any problems in terms of it not looking professional or not looking good, because sometimes you just have to make sure it's a good wig, because if it's like nice from the front, but then it's all jacked up in the back, that's not a problem for an audition. But when you're filming, you're going to turn around maybe and you're going to move your body. And when you move your body, they're going to see the back of your head. And if the back is all jacked up, then you'll get in trouble and then it'll get back to everybody. So I really recommend quality wigs. Lots of people wear them, but again, have really great wigs. If you're going to wear like a cheap $15 wig, then it should be because the character is wearing a cheap $15 wig. I do know actors who booked big roles wearing like a cheap $15 wig because that's what that character had access to, and it sort of brought them to life. And I think is what can help stand somebody out in audition is guts to do something that the character would be doing, instead of waiting until, you're famous. And then the hair conversation, when you get offered a role or when you get a big role, the hair conversation, it's a part of the prep work. And if you have ideas about the character's hair or the character's haircut, that's a part of creating the character and the collaboration with both the hair department and also the director and creatives. I hope that was helpful. I know that was a lot of answers, but in summary, I always make sure my wigs are real hair. The only exception to that should be if the character would wear a wig that is not real hair and looks fake and maybe cheap for a specific reason. My wigs are always very high quality. The back, front, and sides are always really well taken care of. I go and get my hair professionally cut by my hairstylist, Carla Zuniga, a little plug for her. And we cut it so that it fits my face and looks good on my face and that it looks good from every angle. I practice a lot on the wigs so that I feel comfortable and like I can do my best acting. When I book the job, I show up to wardrobe in the wig or wearing the hair pieces or whatever I did. If you're going to get browning spray or a dulling spray to sort of chill out maybe an incredible dye job that you have, I do that when I show up to wardrobe because they're going to send pictures and they're going to send that to the director and the showrunners for approval. And then I at wardrobe will ask to speak to the hair department, and then I will go over and I'll have a conversation with them. And then I go home, and the day of the shoot, I show up ready to work with my wig already on. I don't show up with my normal hair and then go have breakfast and bring a Muppety looking wig in my hands and then get into the trailer. I have it on from the moment I arrive on set. I have bang pieces. I have clip-in extensions for long hair. I have a really short pixie wig. I have a bowl cut wig. I have a shoulder length wig. I have lots of different hair because it really helps me get in the character, and I have never been in trouble for it. All right, good luck.
And now back to your regularly scheduled program.
So I would love to talk to the actors. Part of my intention with this series of episodes is also to talk to the actors who have had to go home, who are looking at their financial realities, their dream realities, and felt like they're in the thick of it and they're feeling like, acting, I don't know, can I do this? This is hard. And what I would love to talk about is you're going into another field, finding success in that field, and then coming back to this field. I would love for you to talk about that because I think that might be a reality that a lot of people are looking at. A lot of people are looking at, well, you know what? Maybe right now being a professional actor doesn't feel like my North Star pursuit. And so I'm going to go and I'm going to get this other profession going. And they might have some fear or some trepidation about coming back to it, or can they, or what sort of success could possibly happen if they come back to it, 10 years later, 20 years later.
So I have, as coming at this as a second career, I have, there's a lot of negatives, but at the same time, there's a lot of positives. The negatives are obviously that I'm older, I'm missing kind of the roles that, the roles are much more, they're not the usually the leads. I don't have the time to wait 10 more years to wait to things, to things come from me. And I have so many other things that are happening. Now, the flip side is, the financial part of things are much easier for me. And it doesn't come up without a downside. The downside is I am working two things full time, probably more than most people are working one. So maybe it might be 60 hours for my business stuff and 60 hours for acting stuff. So it's 120 hours a week, compared to, but that's how I look. But to do that gives me the flexibility to help my acting stuff. So if I need to do something from a financial point of view, and I know it's going to help my career, I don't have the worry of saying I can't do it, even though I know it's going to pay dividends in the future. So that's one of the big benefits. The downside is at the same time, if I have to, work all this time with this other practice. So anyway, so that from that point of view, I think there's pros and cons. I think it's good. It's healthy for people to have passive income that you talk about, because that helps us in there. But sometimes, at the same time, you don't want that other piece to take over the main goal. And if you're, and it's okay to be a secondary goal to be an actor as your second goal, that's fine. But the people I'm talking about, the people who want to be this, they want to be an actor, and you can have the secondary piece help, but really you got to keep the eye on the prize. One way to look at it too is that I look at it all as one macro way together. So for example, if like I have a family, I have three daughters who are older now, but when they were really small, family time was so important. But at the same time, acting was so important. So it's not like, all right, well, if I have to, it's not a trade-off necessarily. If I could, for example, all of a sudden, what happens if they were in a play with me? So all of a sudden I played the king and the king and I, and then all of a sudden my two daughters at that point, my third wasn't born yet, was that they could play the kids in the king and I. So I could have this great family time and acting time at the same time. And when you kind of combine those things, it's even better. And that's what I do to a degree now. And because it's not, to me, it's not all just about acting. There's I have a producing thing. So in the beginning of COVID, I have a producing arm that's not for money, but it's for social justice type things. It's Toe Arboleta Films. And so, for example, earlier in beginning of COVID, we did a video called Coughing While Asian. This was when Asians were getting, really, they're still getting assaulted and attacked, for a lot of those attacks are getting much higher than normal. But this was earlier on when the chances of the scenario, everyone, folk were focused on Asians doing that. And so we did a video and it ended up getting, so I think it's over 10 million views now. And we have a bunch of videos that do that. But I'm not doing it for acting. I'm doing it for the cause. But at the same time, it also helps the acting image piece when all of a sudden someone from China says, "Hey, I just saw you," or someone in somewhere completely around the world says, "Oh my God, I saw you in this." It does help. So when you can tie those different pieces of your life together, it makes you even stronger as an actor.
I love that because what you're describing, which is so much of what I just really love about you, is it's just creative problem solving. To me, that's like the creative process. And it's what I love about building a career is it is the creative process. It's just the creative process towards your acting career rather than the creative process of solving a scene, right? And you're like, problem, need and want to spend time with my children, want to be and need to be an actor. Solution, we will act together. Problem, exactly. I see a lot of racial prejudice and injustices happening towards people who look like me. And also, I have the skills and the abilities of creating and filming content. Solution, I will use one to expose the other in a way that hopefully people can receive and respond to it. And in so doing, the compounding effect is that more people are seeing my face more regularly, maybe going onto my IMDb, maybe thinking about me. And that is extroverting your talent, which I talk about all the time on this podcast. And it's doing in a way that is also in alignment with your values and your ethics, which is so important. Okay, so I would love for us now to talk, if we can, about being an Asian American male and seeing those stories and the growth of those stories in the last, since you were young and acting was a hobby as a youthful pursuit, and then getting into acting. And you said you had come up against some opportunities that you had declined. And then now where you've seen it grow and where you'd like for it to grow. And I'd also love for you to talk about, you have learned some languages. I would love to hear about why you made that choice and the work that was involved in that choice.
Sure. So as probably many people have heard, when I grew up in the 80s, I wouldn't see anybody who looked like me. And if they did, they would be the long duck dongs from 16 Candles, completely asexualized, made fun of, the butt of jokes. And it's so clear when you study this, you see every character that was done at that time. If it was Asian female, it was hypersexualized. If it was Asian male, it was asexualized. It was, and it's so extreme. And you still see them that today. It's just it's more subtle in some cases, but then all of a sudden you see something that's so clear. You're like, oh, there it is again. I was in a movie with Dave Franco and Vince Vaughn and Tom Wilkinson, where I played the Japanese business guy who gets completely drunk and ends up in a hamster ball wheel, and kind of the goofy guy who, he's kind of like the Ken Jeong hangover character that helped me back then. But looking back, I wouldn't take that today. But at the same time, so a lot of my roles were all foreigners. Like, even though I'm a 5th generation American,
yes,
most of the roles that I would go out for were foreigners, people who can't speak English, people who are immigrants where they're making fun of, fun of them. And so that started, I started to not take those roles. But then we started having a change there where Hollywood started showing some of these characters more in 3-dimensional characters with an arc, characters that were maybe compassionate, that were more 3-dimensional. And when I realized that, and I thought Hollywood was not going to change fast enough, I said, well, in that case, I have to be able to know the language. And my Chinese, Mandarin, or Cantonese back then was probably literally the level of a 3-year-old. Like someone who knows Spanish, right?
Yes,
who
right.
takes me to school, it'd be like the 6th grade. Like that's where I was.
Yes.
But I was realistic in saying that I knew that I would have to have accents or speak another language, and even if these roles were good roles and not butt of jokes. So I ended up taking Mandarin from that 3-year-old level, and I ended up taking 2 classes a day, and I did it for 2 years straight.
Yes.
And that was and the way I could afford doing that was I ended up connecting to someone, this was back before Zoom, with working with someone a student in China. So while I was helping with them with their English, they were helping me with Chinese. So and I did pay them, but it was much less than someone 2 half-hour lessons a day.
I love this creative problem solving. I just love that you keep coming up with creative problem solving. Okay, great. I don't want to cut you up, but keep going.
Yeah. So now even though I don't take the lessons anymore, but since then, I've booked a bunch of different things that have me speaking a different language or having the accent piece. But even then I still could get better and better. So now it's like, all right, I did a recent audition with an accent, and my coach was Asian, and she's like, actually, that's pretty good. But in my mind, I hear it. I don't like it. So I know it needs to get better, and so I still have a long way to go.
Good. I love that. I mean, there's so many things I loved about what you just said, because, such a big mission of mine is compassion, understanding, empathy. And I love your pointing out that you're a 5th generation American. It would be the equivalent of I'm like German, Irish, English, like Scandinavian, right? It would be like if somebody was like, listen, if you want to work in Hollywood, you need to learn German. And just so everyone knows, like, look at your heritage and just think like, if in order for you to work, someone's like, you need to learn French. I'm going to need you to learn French. I need you to be fluent in French. And not only that, but particularly for Asian Americans, right? Being like, I'm going to need you to learn French. And do you speak French and German? Do you speak those? Yeah, it's just really hard right now if somebody doesn't speak French and German right now. If a white person doesn't speak French and German, it's just really hard to get
exactly.
I have my own points of view about that, but for you to just think about that perspective, and also for those of you that are feeling the pressure and that feels real as you experience, that feels real of the growth potential in your casting that could happen if you spoke another language. I first would like to say, I think special skills in general often are what helps you book roles, especially in the beginning. And when I talk to any actor out and about in the world, often a lot of their first credits are because they speak another language, right? Whether or not that language seems to be what seems culturally identified with them or not, right? If they are a Caucasian actor who speaks fluent Mandarin, sometimes that can be a real asset. And somebody who looks Hispanic, who can speak English, Spanish, Italian, and French, like that is, of course, going to just sort of open up some possibilities, right? But I love the problem solving and the focus, the attention to detail, and also the real honest checking with yourself and your own ethics. I think that's what's so great, is that you were able to see that now there were roles of a certain caliber and quality that you wanted to get, and that perhaps this special skill would be of value to you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's constantly changing.
It is.
And I'm in right now, while I couldn't see these roles X amount of years, now it's a point where I've went through X amount of years of these, and I kind of glossed over it, but there's some really horrible type roles, horrible kind of scenarios, horrible, kind of like the Asian American male version of the Me Too kind of stuff, a lot of that kind of stuff. But now it's changed. Now the diverse casting is coming is a real strength. And there's so many people who've kind of given up along the way and are not at the position to take advantage of it now that it's here. And so that's why, to me, it's where, you kind of had to go through a lot of these tough years to be able to be in a place to be able to now, as they're looking for these bigger roles, there's not a lot. I don't have the same competition as someone there's some fantastic actors, but I'm not in the same competition as 25-year-old Caucasian female, which there are still tons of roles for, but tons of the competition is actually more. You're right. So that's hard. But I would just say that, but yeah, at this point now that I've kind of gone through those tough years, it's kind of like the point where I'm starting to have my opportunity and then which also then ramps me up to say I need to even work even harder for other pieces or smarter for certain things because now the level is that much better.
Yes, that's right. Yes. So what was your experience in terms of, or thoughts in terms of actors who are starting out and are diverse actors, and they maybe have gotten their first or few co-stars, but are feeling some resistance in being able to go up the ladder, and they're feeling that resistance is correlated to their ethnicity?
Well, I think I look at it from the business point of view where, all right, if that is the case at this point, then you need to own it. If you're going to go to that level, you need to own it. And so that if those are the opportunities that you're getting, you want to make sure you're booking them, because once you start to book them, then you can I don't look at it as being typecast. I think at that point, you now are in the room. You have the relationship with the cast directors who now start to see you in all the other things that you can do. So it can really bring you up to another level. And at the same time, while you're focusing on this area that is where the casting is, whether it's an accent or a certain type of talk or a certain type of like attitude that you're being pigeonholed to do, fine. But that doesn't then mean you kind of, while you're focusing there, also to realize that that's not going to be like that forever as your career goes higher. So you need to now focus on the rest of your acting strength, that even though you might not capitalize on that right away, you have now years to be able to build up this other piece. So when the time comes and the roles start to open up for you, that you're ready. Because if you just focused on that, if you got to do kind of a little bit of both. To me, it's really important. And also to believe that if you really want to do this is a long-term gain. So it's like talking to one of my daughters and they're talking about some of the issues that they have at school or something, kids on their, who are like, whatever, they're not having friends with their friends. I tell them, like, I have like one friend from high school.
Right. Yeah,
so it's like, it's not that it seems like your whole world now, but give it a few years and you realize that was just such a short period of time. Same thing here with casting, I think, and that just realize that you're not going to be there forever. And as long as you're building your craft and continually working and being aware of yourself and finding those areas that you're weak and continue getting stronger and stronger, casting will see that. And the more that all of a sudden things will start to open up for you. It happens. It just trust in the process.
I love that. I love all of that. And thank you so much for that, because that is obviously a perspective that I don't feel qualified or comfortable addressing, but I do believe needs to be continually discussed and addressed for the so many viewers and listeners, I should say, for the so many listeners who find themselves in that position. So I really thank you for that.
Thank you.
I want to touch on something that to me is really a really powerful lesson I've learned from being friends with you. And I want to talk about it because it specifically has to do with the Asian American male and their casting and the growth of the casting potential of that category. So you had done publicity for one of your projects. And one of the things that came up through the publicity was like, not a lot of people wanted to publicize you. Not a lot of people wanted to throw you on things and feature you. I would love to see if you have any thoughts about that from your perspective now that that has passed, and if you felt that that was your experience. And then I'd also love to talk about the roles that you would like to see Asian American men growing into in terms of the stories and inclusion that are being told.
So the movie that I'm one of the lead cast in is called Lucky Grandma, and it premiered at Tribeca a year ago. Mm-hmm. And so I did do publicity for it. And you're right, it wasn't there wasn't a lot of landing places because, first of all, if you see someone at that point, and this was only a year and a half ago, that if you saw an Asian person as an actor, like, well, obviously they're not that big because are you a professional actor? Because they didn't take it seriously. But that was our premiere at Tribeca. But when we actually premiered publicly, we were the first movies to premiere that was supposed to have a theatrical release in August, and we ended up having our virtual release during COVID in May. And a year later from the original, it feels so different than it was a year ago. People all of a sudden, and I think all of a sudden people see the potential there. You're starting to see the idea where consumers are not just U.S. centric. There's much more world viewership and consumers there. And so I think Hollywood is starting to change, and I'm seeing that really happen. And I just hosted a cast Q&A with some of my friends of Mulan, and it was amazing to see such a big movie, such a large movie, $200 million movie with an all Asian cast. I mean, that's, there's a lot of things that people are talking about the movie, but to be able to see a movie though, and my daughters going to, having their friends over, my family over outside on the screen, socially distant COVID, but seeing somebody that looks like them and they were crying and laughing, and the next day having other friends over. I mean, that doesn't happen with kids, with teenagers. And to see that, it was amazing.
Well, people also forget or don't know because they're too young that really not very long ago at all, many of those roles would have been cast Caucasian anyway, even though it's called Mulan and it's about a story. I mean, literally just look at so many of the movies from really not very long ago at all, too long ago, and how many Caucasian white actors were cast as Asian people. And that was
not long ago at all.
Really?
Literally
like 3 years ago. Like not long ago at all. Right. And so it's easy to right now, I think, have this perspective of like, well, of course. I mean, of course we would cast Mulan. Like, so you saying it, I think the perspective from a lot of the listeners can be like, well, of course you would cast Mulan with an Asian cast. And that's literally like they don't understand your perspective of the true groundbreaking, unfortunately, groundbreakingness of that reality.
There are a lot of younger Asians who feel that too. Like, well, we wanted more of this and more of this, which is to me, I'm like, you have not gone through the tough years. Yeah, right. But that also is a good thing in that the generation is saying, oh, we've improved enough that we can strive for even more. And so I'm happy to see that too.
Absolutely. I love that. But wait, Michael, wait. You're so inspiring, but I have to interrupt you.
Help me. I need some help.
And now it's time for listener questions.
I'm so scared.
This listener question is brought to you by Brad Greenquist. That's Brad Greenquist, who is an incredible on-camera audition technique actor and teacher. So Brad does private Zoom sessions online, which is great. He has half hour or hour. Obviously, you can always book him for more. Self-taping techniques, camera techniques, scene study, film and TV material. He is not currently doing classes, but I just want to say to you, I really recommend Zoom right now. I really recommend privates right now. I think everything is going to be online for now until forever. I don't know that we're going back in the room. And the more that you can sort of be ready to do your best work, callbacks will be over Zoom. And the camera is such an important part of what we're doing. It's a huge transition in how it's different from theater. Brad is a theater-trained actor who's been working in film and television for 30, 40 years. He has a working actor son. He has been teaching classes. So if you are a person who's looking to transition from the theater world into in front of the camera, he is such an incredible and highly qualified person to be having that discussion and experience and practice with. He is a master of teaching actors to use their frame and the camera as another tool in your toolbox, which I have to say, so many actors, it's such a big habit to just like treat the screen like this box, and you're sort of like doing like a presentational public speaking engagement or something. It's like nobody moves. Everyone stands in one place. Everyone's standing, even if the character would clearly be sitting. Everyone's like faced so clearly directly forward at the reader and never moves their head. And it doesn't look authentic. It doesn't look real. It looks very presentational. And if that's something that you are feeling insecure about, if that's something that you've been told that, you have to just stay in one place and don't move and just look straight, I just want you to know that's not true. And there are lots of subtleties, and work with somebody so that you can start to make the camera your friend. He is a working actor. He's been working for decades. And how many times you guys just feel like, oh, I just wish I could work with somebody who's working, who auditions all the time and books all the time, and he does. I'm also a really big fan of having a few coaches at your disposal. I have 5 to 7 coaches that I use on a regular basis. It's so important to be able to have a person for one thing and a person for another thing. And if you work with somebody and you feel like, oh God, they're really great at this particular thing with me, then you have that in your arsenal. You're sort of creating your network, creating your team. You can contact him at www.bradsclass.com. That's BRADSCLASS.com. And again, just a reminder, if you have listener questions, please call us at 667-ACTOR-70. That's 667-ACTOR-70.
Hey, Audrey, this is Sarah in Los Angeles. I have a quick question regarding auditions, specifically self-tapes, where you are auditioning for 2 different scenes, same character, just 2 different premises. Yeah, in those situations, do you suggest that we wear 2 different outfits or style ourselves 2 different ways, specifically if the 2 different scenes are very, very different? So, for example, if one of the scenes takes place at like a high school party and then the next scene takes place at track practice, would it be appropriate to, put your hair up in a ponytail, throw on a tank top for track practice, and do something a little bit more like fun and glam for the party scene? Or should you just pick a typical outfit that would work for that character? Maybe like a t-shirt, normal makeup, something that would work for both. All right, thank you. Bye.
OMG, hey girl, hey. I love this question. I love the things that you guys freak out about, that you think that somebody is going to watch you do like a self-tape where you wear 2 different outfits and have 2 different hairstyles and 2 different types of makeup, that somebody's going to be like, this is disgusting. I will never hire her. And they throw it against the room. You would do incredible work, but do that. And then people would be like, amateur. And then you would be crossed off a list. She's a great actress, but I don't want to see 2 outfits in one self-tape. Nay, you are stricken from the list. So that's my funny, hopefully, way of saying that, I can't read the director's minds. I know that when I did the crossover episode with the 2 directors from Just Shoot It podcast, there are 2 commercial and television directors who work a lot. And one of them was like, God, I die for props. And I just want you to pop into frame. And I want you to do all these fun things. And the other guy was like, I hate it. I want to kill myself. If you do that, I'm just so over you. So, you don't get that information. And this is one of the things about self-tapes is in the room was kind of like a great equalizer, right? We would all have the same room, the same reader, and the same chair, and the same bad lighting, and the same camera, and all of it. And we were all sort of subject to the same environment. But with self-tapes, we're not, and we don't know the director's preference. If they say something like, please put the scenes in order, please one outfit only, please wear something neutral, please no costumes, I would say then definitely follow that, because that's probably a note that the casting director is getting specifically from the director. That casting director is hired by the director and knows very well that that director doesn't like a bunch of frou-frou and a bunch of special stuff. Otherwise, what I have experienced is that this is a visual medium. I book off of tape, and I definitely wear different outfits for different scenes. I have different outfits, I have different hair, different makeup, sometimes a different background. You're creating a little mini stamp on the work, and you don't have to go cuckoo bananas with it. But I do think anything that can help visually differentiate between these two scenes is helpful. That's why they're going to film it that way. If they wanted the scene in the same location, in the same outfit, and in the same things, they would do it. But it's actually going to be in two different places, in two different outfits, and two different makeup styles probably, and different music and different all of it, because it's like we're at this part of the story and now we're at that part of the story. So that's what I've experienced. But just remember, at the end of the day, a great audition is a great audition. Whatever you can do to do incredible work, if the time it's going to take you to do your hair and do your makeup and put on a different outfit and get a different background or something like that, if that's an hour to 3 hours for some women, depending on the role, for some men, maybe to do something like that where you really could have been working on the actual work, on the acting, put the work on the acting. If you have the time to do different outfit, to make it visually different, that's great. But I would say most people are putting the emphasis on these sort of visual nuances, and they really need to be putting that emphasis on story. Story, 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 story. And that may mean instead of spending the time putting on a different outfit and experimenting with different outfits, you watch an episode of the show. You watch a movie made by the same director. You get coached by somebody. You just run it a little bit more on We Audition and get it under your belt, whatever that is. So yes, there are no rules. I think it's more visually interesting to go ahead and do that. I have done it, and I do book with it. I pretty much always do it, and I book. That said, it's just one detail, and it is not as important a detail as the actual execution of the work of the scenes. All right. I hope you book it. Book it.
And now back to your regularly scheduled program.
Okay, so now where would you like to see the casting and the stories of, I will say in particular, the Asian American male, and I would love even maybe more specifically the Asian American male in his 40s, you know, what would be some stories that you would love to see more of?
It's that's a hard question because the answer, just think of any of the shows that you watch, and the ones that you automatically would think of would be a 40-year-old Caucasian male. It could be anything. It could be from the firefighter shows, the cop shows, the detective ones, the dramas, the multicams, and the multicams, any of those things. Yeah. It's
the lead
to have the lead or someone who is viewed as attractive and without forcing it. That's hard for me to answer because to me there's so many different possibilities there.
My friend Tom, who is Asian American male in his 40s, who I had recorded an episode with him about our pension and health plan, but that unfortunately because of COVID, we haven't aired it yet because I felt like, you know what people aren't excited about listening about right now? Pension. He basically said like the Asian Tom Hankses. The guys that are like, that are just the lead male love interest to the lead female. And there be nothing about anything about it except that he just is. And maybe he's the dad and maybe he's the whatever. And it was such a great, I loved when he said that. It's these moments that I have that I am so grateful for the podcast too, in being able to have a platform to have these open dialogues where I was able to realize, like, I haven't really seen that. That's not something that, and he had acknowledged
Always Be My Maybe.
Yes. So he had brought up Always Be My Maybe, and he had even brought up the role on Fresh Off the Boat, but even still acknowledging that those were still
same actor.
Same actor, and Asian-centric cast, as opposed to, you can have an actress of any other race and then be the lead female, the mom or the wife or the, sexy love interest, whatever it is, and then have the male partner, attractive love interest, be an Asian male. And it's one of those things where when I realized that that's kind of sounds like, wow, that would be like kind of prolific. That sounds like that would be really crazy. And I realized, like, that sounds like that would be crazy. Like that my like internal monologue is like, well, that would be really groundbreaking. And I'm like, right. Groundbreaking? So
a good example of that is right now when you do see kind of Asians in that role, it's usually the Caucasian male and the Asian female. You never see it the other way around, where it's an Asian male, Caucasian female. Now, the argument could be, well, if you look at kind of the interracial relationships, it's usually that way. But then I would go back and say, you could also say, well, which is it because of this, and so it's really interesting.
I would argue the latter. I would really argue the latter. I think that we are the storytellers and we set the cultural narrative in our business. And that's why it is so important to continue to be self-aware and talk interracially with each other about these sort of experienced stories and these experienced casting sort of prerogatives, right? So that so many of the people listening, I'm so passionate about, I know so many of them are multi-talented writers, actors, directors, producers. And, if you are thinking of a romance and you have a female Caucasian actress, maybe consider a diverse male and maybe consider that male being an Asian American and maybe consider that they're sexy. And that could be. And then think about how you haven't seen that really.
Right.
Absolutely. And then I dare you to do a Google search about the history of that, because that shit gets really real and really deep. So do a Google search about that. Okay, love. Okay, so I'm so happy that we've had this conversation. We'll wrap up. What is the best part about the business to you?
I love the look where my daughters 364 days of the year don't care about me, and then the one day that they see me on something that their friends might have seen too, they're actually proud of their dad.
That is so adorable. I love it so much. Edie Falco talks about that a lot, which is really funny. I think like all actors, no matter what level, is just trying to get their kids to care. I love that. I love that. What is the worst part about the business for you?
I love everything about it.
I think that's great.
Most everything about it. So I don't have
What is the most frustrating part of the business to you? How about that? Not the worst, but like what's something that irks you?
It's a little bit of what we talked about earlier. When you're ready for something, you trained and you do everything you can do possible. It's still up to when the timing is right.
Yes.
And sometimes that timing, even with knowing that it'll come and just doing the work, and sometimes when it doesn't, or it just takes longer than it should, that's frustrating.
Yes. I keep quoting my Star Trek quote of Jean-Luc Picard: you can do everything right and still lose. And that's not failure. That is life. And I say, that's not failure. That's an acting career. Okay, great. Excellent. That's a little nerd for everybody. Okay. What do you wish someone had taught you or managed to get you to understand when you were just a wee babe entering this business?
that it's the game for the long term. Mm-hmm. And if you make decisions based on the long term, your decisions will be mostly right. So if you're at a point where you're in a difficult scenario, not sure what to do, think what is best for the long term and make that your choice.
Ooh, I just want to applaud that. And I want to think about it for my own life because I think that's so great. I love it, Michael. Okay. Mildly interesting.
Oh my God. I can't believe I listened to all your podcasts and I wasn't even ready. My mildly interesting is I had Beyond Burgers yesterday. And it was, first of all, cooking it looked like the real thing. It smelled like the real thing. And it tasted amazing. And I hadn't had beef for a long time. And this was like, oh my God, this is so delicious. The reason why it's not an amazing, interesting thing is this probably was pretty filled with chemicals and stuff like that, even though it wasn't meat. Right. But it was very tasty and it was also and it was very expensive too. More expensive than meat.
Yes. Beyond doesn't necessarily mean organic and healthy. It just means beyond meat in many ways.
But it was tasty.
But delicious. Well, that's what matters. I mean, right? That's what matters to you. I love it. Well, listen, Michael, thank you so much for this episode. Thank you. You guys can hear he's obviously a very busy guy, but I am so grateful for you giving this time. I think you're going to inspire a lot of people, and you're going to inspire, I think, a lot of understanding and compassion and give a good challenge to a lot of people.
Thanks so much, Audrey. I'm really happy to have you, that you have me on.
Next week on Audrey Helps Actors, we have Emily Berry. Oh my God, Berrytown coming to town. Oh my God, I love Emily Berry. Emily Berry got her shit together, you guys. I have known Emily for like a decade. We used to do workshops together in the day. There were three of us, me, Emily, and Allie Rodriguez. Allie and I and Emily, we would just be like, boom. And we would sit there and we would just do every single workshop all week. And now we're all working. So, just say, hey, what's up? And I love her. She talks about her journey during the last economic collapse. She bounced the fuck out like I know a lot of you did. And she was like, I'm done. And it turned out she wasn't done. She came back and she booked I think she booked 19 jobs last year or something crazy. She just works all the time. So really inspiring. I think you're really gonna appreciate the episode. Special thanks to Michael Toe. Michael, I love you. Thank you so much for coming on the episode. Thank you so much for doing the podcast. Thank you for all the work that you do in your community for the actors. You're such an incredible cheerleader. Your wife and family are so lucky to have you, and your community and New York and the East Coast, they are so blessed to have you amongst them. Keep working. I'm super excited to see your star rise. Special thanks this week and every week to Thomas Snodgrass for his incredible work with sound. Thanks, Tommy. You guys, Thomas loves to surf, so if you ever see him out there, just give him a little hang something sign with your hands. Executive producer, Jesse Lumen, my still so handsome husband, getting more handsome every year, I should say. Show music by Ari De Niro, theme song by Aalok Mehta and 108 Hill, and editing this season by Taylor Martorana. Taylor! Crushing it. We are so excited to have you join our team this season. All right, you guys, don't forget your towel.